Today I'm going to be showing you the majority of the Koopa Troopa plushes that have ever been released, starting off with the first ones in the early 1990s to the newest ones that were only released a few years ago. Now there's actually two Koopa Troopa plushes that could have been the first, it's either this one or this one. Now the second one I showed you is the much more well-known one, as though it was released in 1992 by Ben Presto, but this other one basically has no information about it, and that's why I really have no idea when it was released. As though all I really know is that it was released in the early 1990s, but I don't know if it was released after or before 1992. As though I could really only find one website talking about this plush, and it says it's from the year 1990, but that's only one source, so I'm not sure if it's correct or anything. As though I don't even know which company made this plush or what year it was released, but I'm still gonna go over it as well, but it seems to be a pretty interesting one. But yeah, either one of these Koopa Troopa plushes could have been the first, but I can't really tell which one's the first, as though this one doesn't really have a confirmed release date to it. Now the face on this plush actually looks pretty good, as well, even though the shape of it sorta looks weird, it is actually accurate to the time when this plush was released. And while the eyes on this plush are made out of a felt material, meaning that they could get damaged, and the mouth seems to have been stitched on. The plush's body overall looks pretty accurate. The shell does have some lines on them just to give it a bit more accuracy, and you could actually see that this plush has wings. So technically this one is a paratroopa, but it still has a green shell on it, as well, for whatever reason. The really early Koopa Troopa plushes had a green shell with paratroopa wings, which obviously isn't correct, but that's just how it was at the time. But yeah, the wings could get band damaged because they're made out of a felt material, and the rest of the plush looks fine. But yeah, overall, it's just a really mysterious plush, and I've only ever found one image of it from one website, so I don't really know when it was released or anything really about this plush. Now moving on to the much more well-known one, we have the Ben Presto Paratroopa, released in 1992. Now just like the last plush we looked at, this one has a green shell but also has wings on it. And while the eyes on this plush look pretty good, they are made out of a plastic material, so they could get chipped and damaged. The nose pieces could also fall off because they're only glued on and they're really just small pieces of material. And for the mouth on this plush, it just seems to be nicely stitched on. The head shape on this plush also looks pretty accurate, and it seems to be pretty nicely stuffed. The arms and legs on this plush do look sort of weird though, as well. They're just really small, but that's just kind of how the plush was made, as well. It seems to have just a certain style to it. But yeah, the shell on this plush looks pretty good, and the wings are once again made out of a felt material, so they could get bent and damaged pretty easily. And well, if you want, this plush is actually really common. You can find it on eBay for only around $15, which is actually really cheap, especially for a plush this old. Now moving on to 1996, we have the Super Mario 64 Ben Presto Koopa Troopa plush. Now the eyes on this plush are made out of a felt material, and it actually has a line going through them just to separate them, which is actually a really good detail that I'm glad they added. As well, even though it's just a really small and simple detail, it still looks really good. And while the nose on this plush could once again get damaged, as well, they're only made out of small pieces of felt material and they're only glued on. The face on this plush was also really nicely shaped, and they did a really good job stuffing it. And well, one of the most unique things about this plush is that the hands are actually circles, as well. That's how they were in the game, and it's just a really unique feature that only this plush has. As the one thing Ben Presto did a really good job with on this plush is that they got the Super Mario 64 art style really good, as well. It's just a really distinct style. So yeah, they definitely did a really good job with that, and the feet on this plush also look pretty good, and they have some cardboard in the bottom of them just to give it a bit more detail. And while the shell on this plush also looks pretty good, and all the stitching on it looks really nice, and they did a great job with it. They also stuffed it really nicely, so it just keeps its shape, and they overall just did a really good job with this entire plush, and just got the art style down really good. And well, if you want this plush, there are a few listings on eBay and also on Yahoo Japan, but it will be pretty expensive, as well, this plush is pretty rare. Moving on to the next plush, we have the 2007 Ben Presto Keychain Koopa Troopa. Now the face on this plush just sort of looks weird, as well. The way it's stuffed and everything just kind of gives it a strange look. And while this plush's eyes are iron on, and same thing with the nose detail, so it could get damaged, as well, but the iron on material could crack pretty easily. The mouth on this plush is stitched on. It seems to be really nicely stitched on, and overall looks pretty good. This plush has lines on the front of the shell, and the back of the shell is also nicely made, and it seems to be fully accurate. One thing that I don't really like about this plush is that it is in a pretty weird pose, as well, for whatever reason, his right leg is just really far up. As well, this Koopa Troopa plushes, for whatever reason, is in a jumping pose, which if you really think about it, doesn't make any sense, as well. Koopa Troopas don't jump. So it's overall just a really weird pose for him to be in, and overall this plush just sort of looks strange. Moving on, we have the 2009 Snake Koopa Troopa plush. Now this is definitely one of the most well-known Koopa Troopa plushes, and it looks pretty good. The eyes on this plush are really nicely stitched on, and they overall just look really good, as well Snake just has really good embroidery on their plushes. The face also looks basically perfect, as well Snake just did a great job stuffing everything just to give it a bit more detail, and they also did a good job with all the shaping and everything. The front of the shell on this plush has a bit of stitching to give it detail, and the back of the shell has the most stitching out of the entire plush, and it all looks really good. As of all the embroidery on the shell looks perfectly accurate, and they just did a great job with it. The hands on this plush also have a bit more detail because they have some stitched on fingers, which just give it a tiny bit more detail, so even though it's a really small one, it's still a really good one. And while the shoes on this plush look perfectly accurate, and they're once again just really nicely stuffed, just like the rest of the plush. And well, this plush is actually really hard to find, especially because there's tons of bootlegs of this plush. As well, not only is there just a normal variant of this plush, which is just a bootleg, there's also this variant where it has a blue shell, which is actually a pretty cool bootleg, as well there's no actually blue shell Koopa Troopa plushes, so yeah, it's definitely a really creative one. But besides this one creative bootleg, all the other ones made of this plush just don't really look that good, and they're just really low quality compared to the original. And if you do want to find the original, he will actually cost a lot of money, and he'll be extremely hard to find, as well there's just so many fakes that blend in with the real ones. Next we have the PMS International Koopa Troopa. Now the face on this plush is actually just really nicely made, as well they did a great job stuffing it and everything, and they overall just did a really good job with it. They also did a really good job stitching everything on the face, like the eyes and the nose, and they also do look pretty nice. They also added a bit of extra detail to the hands on this plush, as well they stitched on the fingers, and they actually did a really good job with it, as well they just made it look really accurate. And while the front of the shell on this plush has some nice stitching on it, and the back of the shell they overall just did a really good job with everything and got all the details correct with the embroidery. They also just stuffed this plush really nicely so it keeps its shape, which is just another really good thing about it. So yeah, overall, they just did a really good job with basically every single detail on this plush, and it just looks really nice. And if you want this plush, you can look on websites like eBay, and it should be pretty easy to find, especially in some countries like the UK. Moving on to the next plush, we have the Goldie 2010 Koopa Troopa. Now, out of any Koopa Troopa plush, this is by far the most well-known one, and it's also one of the better-looking ones. As though the face on this plush seems to be really nicely stuffed, and they did a good job with the stitching on the face, like the eyes and nose. And while they also just did a really good job shaping the face and everything, and they overall just did a really good job with it. The front and back of the shell both have really nice embroidery on it, and they basically just look perfectly accurate. The hands on this plush have a bit of extra stitching on them, and they actually have a full another piece of plush material for the thumbs just to give it a bit more detail. The only downside to this though is that sometimes the hands in these plushes do look a bit big compared to the rest of the plush's proportions. And well, for the shoes on this plush, they overall just did a really good job of them, and they look perfectly accurate. And well, this is also just a really cheap Koopa Troopa plush that you could get really easily, as you could easily find on websites like eBay and Mercari for around $15 to $25, mattering on the condition of it. Moving on, we have the World of Nintendo Koopa Troopa plush. Now this plush was made by the company Jakks Pacific and their World of Nintendo line, and well, they did a pretty good job with it. Now the face on this plush does look pretty well shaped. The nose is kind of in a weird shape though, but it's just really pointy for some reason. And one thing that makes this plush stand out from the others is that the outside of the eyes are actually made out of a blue embroidery instead of just having a normal black embroidery on them. Which I don't really understand why they did that. It just makes this plush stand out a bit more from the other Koopa Troopa plushes. As well, it doesn't really make the plush look any worse. It's just it's a pretty cool detail that no other company added on their own Koopa plush. And while the nose on this plush is once again stitched on, the face seems to be pretty nicely stuffed. The shell has some really nice embroidery on the front and back of it, and they just did a really good job of it, but one of the stranger parts of the plush is the hands. As well, they just look a lot bigger than they're actually supposed to be, as well, compared to the rest of the plush with the proportions, the hands are just way too big. The main reason for this is that instead of just adding stitching, they actually made all the fingers separate, which just wasn't really that good of a move, as well, but just made the plush look sort of strange. But besides that one pretty strange detail, the rest of the plush looks okay. The shoes are sort of weird though, as well the middle of them is just kind of curving and they look pretty strange. So yeah, compared to some of the other Koopa Troopa plushes in this video, this really isn't that good compared to them, as there's just a lot of details on this plush that don't really make a lot of sense to have. And well, if you want this plush, it actually is pretty hard to find, so you could look on eBay and Mercari, but I haven't seen that many listings of it. And well, moving on to the most recent Koopa Troopa plush, we have the Sine All-Star one. Now, surprisingly, this plush was actually released back in 2017, meaning we haven't had a Koopa Troopa plush in 7 years. So yeah, besides a couple of bootleg ones that have released recently, no official Koopa Troopa plushes have been released in 7 years. And well, I sort of see why, as well, not many companies could actually improve on Sine's version, as well, but it just looks really good. As of all the details on the face just look really good, and they're all just really nicely stuffed. The embroidery on the face is also just basically perfect, and there's not really any way to improve it. And well, same thing with the stitching and embroidery on the shell, they just did a really good job with it, both on the front and back of it, and there's nothing you could really improve there. And while the hands on this plush do look a bit big, but besides that, they do look pretty good, so all the stitching on them just looks really nice. And while the shoes and legs on this plush just seem to be really nicely stuffed, and all the details are accurate. So the most likely reason why we haven't had a Koopa Troopa plush in 7 years is though there's not really a reason to, as though this one's just basically perfect with all the details and everything. As of in terms of accuracy, this plush is basically just perfect, so I see why Nintendo never got another company to make one, as though there's really no reason to. So yeah, if you want to buy the most accurate looking Koopa Troopa plush, I would definitely go with this one, as well. It's just really common, as well as what you can find on eBay, Amazon, and basically every website. So yeah, that was the history of the Koopa Troopa plushes. If you enjoyed this video, then please like and subscribe, and comment down below which of these plushes are your favorite, and yeah, have a great day.